I was born 7 minutes after my twin sister, and somehow those 7 minutes decided our entire lives. People love to say twins are treated the same, but that has never been true in my house. If you are listening to this thinking favoritism is obvious and loud, you are wrong. In my family it was quiet, polite, and wrapped in praise that sounded like love. And by the time I realized what it was doing to me, it had already shaped who I would become. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I am 22 years old, and I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the street. White siding, trimmed hedges, a porch that smelled like fresh paint every spring. Neighbors waved. Family photos lined the hallway, 2 identical girls, smiling in matching dresses. But if you looked closely at those photos, you might notice something small. My mother always rested her hand on my sister Lauren, never on me. Lauren and I were born the same day in the same room, just minutes apart. The doctor joked that we would be inseparable. He was wrong. From the moment we could walk, people commented on how different we were. Lauren was sensitive, emotional, needed comfort. I was calm, quiet, easy. That word easy followed me everywhere. It was used like a compliment, but it became an excuse. When we were little and fell on the playground, my mother would scoop Lauren into her arms at the first sign of tears. "Poor baby," she would say, brushing dirt from her knees. When I scraped my hands, my mother handed me a napkin and said, "You are strong, Evelyn, you will be fine." I believed her. I learned to swallow pain quickly. As we grew older, the pattern settled in. Lauren forgot homework and my mother wrote notes to the teacher. I forgot homework and got a lecture about responsibility. Lauren cried at night, and my father sat on her bed until she fell asleep. I stayed awake alone, listening to the house go quiet, telling myself I did not need help. I was easy, remember. By middle school, I understood something without anyone explaining it. Love in our house was not unlimited. It was distributed carefully, and I was expected to need less. I stopped asking for things, stopped complaining. I learned that silence made life smoother, and the more I stayed out of the way, the more praise I received for being mature. In high school, Lauren shined loudly, cheerful, confident, surrounded by friends. Every achievement was celebrated publicly, photos posted, dinners planned. When she won an award, my parents told everyone at church. I worked just as hard but quietly. When I brought home certificates, they were smiled at, then placed in drawers. My parents said they were proud, but their eyes drifted back to Lauren every time she entered the room. I started working after school at a small bookstore downtown. Not because we needed the money, but because I liked the feeling of earning something that was mine. Lauren spent weekends at the mall with friends. I counted tips and tucked bills into envelopes under my bed. My parents called it balance. I called it practice. The night everything became clear did not involve shouting or cruelty. It was soft, ordinary, the most dangerous kind of moment. Lauren and I had both applied to the same college, same major, accounting. When the acceptance letters arrived, we screamed together in the kitchen. For a moment, we were equals again. 2 girls laughing, holding envelopes. That night, I came downstairs for water and heard my parents talking. They did not know I was there. My mother said, "We will pay Lauren's tuition in full. Evelyn will figure it out. She always does." My father agreed. "She is independent," he said. "She does not need as much help." I stood on the stairs, gripping the railing so tightly my hand hurt. Those words were not said with anger. They were said with certainty, as if my future had already been decided. In that moment, something inside me went very still. I did not confront them. I did not cry. I went back to my room and sat on my bed, staring at the wall. I thought about all the times I had been strong because I was expected to be. All the times being easy meant being overlooked. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped relying on their idea of me. That was the beginning of the story they never saw coming. Because what they mistook for independence was actually endurance. And endurance, when pushed far enough, turns into something else entirely. If you have ever been the child who needed less, the one praised for being strong, the one expected to figure it out alone, then listen carefully. This story is not about anger. It is about what happens when silence finally decides to speak through success. Before we continue, if you still believe in your heart that God is always watching, always silently arranging everything, then right now, please leave an amen comment below the video. Because who knows, the moment you write those words, blessings may quietly come into your life. By the time people started telling us how lucky we were to be twins, I had already learned that luck does not land evenly. If you have ever watched someone receive love like oxygen, while you learn to breathe without it, then you will understand this part of my story. because what happened next was not one moment, it was a pattern, quiet, consistent, and impossible to unsee once it formed. Lauren and I shared a room growing up, two twin beds pushed against opposite walls, same curtains, same dresser, same posters taped above our heads. From the outside it looked fair, but fairness in our house was never about what things looked like. It was about who was allowed to need more. Lauren needed more. That was the story everyone agreed on. If Lauren woke up from a bad dream, my mother appeared instantly, soft voice, lights dimmed, arms wrapped tight. If I woke up scared and wandered into the hallway half asleep, my mother would gently guide me back to bed and whisper, "You are okay, Evelyn. Go back to sleep. You are strong." I learned early that strength meant being sent away. At breakfast, Lauren sat closer to my parents. She talked. They listened. I ate quietly and cleared plates when no one noticed. When guests came over, Lauren was introduced first. "This is Lauren," they would say, smiling proudly. "And this is Evelyn." Always second, always an addition, never the center. No one ever said I mattered less. That is the hardest part. They never had to. Their actions spoke fluently. When Lauren cried, my parents panicked. When I cried, they evaluated. What happened? What did you do? How can you fix it? Comfort for her, correction for me. Over time, I stopped crying altogether. I did not want to trigger disappointment. By elementary school, the rules were clear, even if they were never written. Lauren was fragile. I was capable. Lauren was sensitive. I was resilient. Lauren was protected. I was prepared. Prepared for what I did not yet know. One afternoon in 3rd grade, Lauren forgot her lunch at home. My mother drove it to school immediately, apologizing to the front office like she had committed a crime. The next week I forgot my lunch. I sat through the day hungry. When I told my mother that evening, she said, "You should have remembered. This will help you learn." I nodded. I did not argue. I told myself learning was worth being uncomfortable. That was how it always went. Lauren was shielded from discomfort. I was trained through it. At birthday parties, Lauren received new toys, bright boxes wrapped carefully. I received her old ones, sometimes cleaned, sometimes repainted, like a favor. My parents called it practical. They told me I did not mind, because I was mature, and I believed them because it felt easier than admitting it hurt. The thing about being the easy child is that people forget you still feel things. In middle school, Lauren struggled with math. My father spent hours at the kitchen table helping her. When I brought home straight, as no one adjusted their schedule, I did homework alone at my desk with the door closed. When I asked for help once, my mother said, "You are already doing great. Let us focus on your sister right now." There was always a right now for Lauren. By then, I had stopped expecting fairness. I only wanted predictability. And favoritism is very predictable when you understand its logic. Lauren needed support because she was sensitive. I did not because I was strong. The more I proved that strength, the more invisible I became. Teachers noticed it before my parents did. One asked me during a parent conference if everything was okay at home. I said yes because that was easier. Another praised my independence, and my mother beamed. "See, she is fine," she said. And just like that, my independence became proof that nothing needed to change. At home, Lauren talked about her fears, her worries, her dreams. My parents leaned in. When I talked about mine, the room went quiet, then shifted topics. Eventually, I stopped sharing. Silence became safer than being unheard. By high school, Lauren and I looked like a matched set to everyone else. Same face, same height, same last name, but emotionally we lived on different planets. She moved through life assuming help would arrive. I moved through life assuming it would not. I started staying late at school, joined clubs that did not require fees, found comfort in libraries and quiet places where no one expected anything from me. I learned how to listen more than speak, how to observe, how to wait. Waiting became my skill. My parents called me low maintenance. They said it like it was a gift. What they did not realize was that low maintenance is what children become when they learn their needs are inconvenient. Lauren once asked me why I never got upset. I told her I did not see the point. She laughed and said, "I wish I was more like you." She had no idea how expensive being like me really was. By the time we reached senior year, I no longer expected my parents to change. I just wanted to survive long enough to leave. I told myself college would be different, that distance would even things out, that maybe without daily comparisons I would finally exist on my own terms. I did not know then that college would not break the pattern. It would expose it. and once exposed, it would force me to make a choice. Continue being the strong one in silence, or finally let my strength build something they could never take credit for. That realization was coming. I just did not know yet how loudly it would arrive. The first time I realized success could actually make things worse was during junior year of high school. If you think doing well will finally earn you equal treatment, then this part of my story may surprise you. Because sometimes achievement does not close the gap, it quietly confirms who the family has already chosen. By then, Lauren and I were both good students. On paper we looked evenly matched. Same grades, same advanced classes, same college counselors encouraging big plans. But the way our success was received at home could not have been more different. When Lauren brought home a good grade, my mother reacted with relief. "See, she is doing better," she would say, as if the world had been holding its breath. When I brought home the same grade, the response was brief and calm. "Of course you did, you always do." No celebration, no relief, just expectation. Lauren needed encouragement to succeed. I was expected to succeed without it. That difference shaped everything. Lauren talked openly about her dreams. She wanted a beautiful college experience, dorm life, sorority events, trips with friends. My parents listened carefully, nodding, asking questions, planning ahead. When I talked about my goals, my parents smiled, but their attention drifted. "You will be fine wherever you go," my father said once. "You adapt easily." I wondered when adapting had replaced being cared for. I started to notice how my parents framed our achievements differently when talking to others. "Lauren is working so hard," they would say proudly. "She has been under so much pressure." When they spoke about me, it was, "Evelyn is so responsible. She never causes trouble. She is very independent." Independent was not praise anymore. It was a role I had been assigned. Senior year arrived faster than I expected. College applications took over the house. Essays, printers, deadlines. Lauren stressed openly. She cried at the kitchen table, saying she was scared she would not get in anywhere good. My mother sat beside her, rubbing her back, telling her everything would work out. I worked on my applications quietly at my desk late at night. No one asked if I was scared too. We applied to many of the same schools, same major accounting, same city preferences. When the acceptance emails began arriving, we opened them together. There was laughter, excitement, nervous energy. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe things would finally feel equal. The first acceptance came on a Tuesday afternoon. Lauren screamed so loud the neighbors could hear. My parents hugged her, cried, took photos. When my acceptance arrived an hour later, my mother smiled and said, "That is great, honey." Then she turned back to Lauren to discuss dorm layouts. I told myself not to be petty. This was just excitement. It did not mean anything. I kept repeating that until it almost sounded true. The real moment came later. Quiet again. Ordinary again. The way all the important moments in my life seemed to be. It was late evening. The house was calm. I went downstairs to get water and heard my parents talking in the living room. They did not know I was there. They were relaxed, honest. "We will need to plan finances," my mother said. "Lauren's tuition will be expensive but worth it. She deserves the full experience." My father agreed immediately. "We will pay it all. She should not have to worry about money. College is stressful enough." I stood still on the stairs. My heart started beating hard enough that I worried they could hear it. "What about Evelyn?" my mother asked after a pause. There was a moment of silence. Then my father said, "Evelyn is clever. She will figure something out. She always does." My mother sighed, not in concern but in acceptance. "She is independent," she said. "She does not need as much help." That was it. No discussion, no debate, no comparison of needs. The decision had already been made. In that moment I understood something very clearly. My success had not earned me equal support. It had disqualified me from needing any. I did not move. I did not breathe. I stayed on those stairs listening to them talk about budgets and payment plans for Lauren, as if I did not exist. When the conversation ended, I went back to my room quietly and closed the door. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall for a long time. I replayed the words in my head. "She does not need as much help." They sounded reasonable, logical, even kind, and that was what made them hurt the most. I realized then that no matter how hard I worked, how responsible I was, how little trouble I caused, I would never be the child they worried about. And in their world, the child they worried about was the child who mattered. I did not confront them. I did not argue. I did not ask questions. I knew what the answers would be. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching scholarships, loans, work-study programs, anything that would allow me to move forward without asking again. That night, something shifted inside me. I stopped measuring myself against Lauren. I stopped hoping my parents would notice. I stopped believing fairness would arrive on its own. College was no longer a shared journey. It was a dividing line. Lauren would step into adulthood supported, celebrated, protected. I would step into it alone, but alone did not scare me anymore. Because if being strong meant being overlooked, then I would use that strength differently. I would build something so quietly and so completely that one day they would have to see it whether they wanted to or not. I did not know how yet. I only knew that the girl who walked down those stairs for water that night did not come back the same. And the version of me that was forming did not plan on asking for permission ever again. The summer after that conversation moved slowly, like the house itself was holding its breath. If you have ever realized the truth about your place in a family and then had to keep living inside that truth without reacting, you will understand how heavy those months felt. Nothing exploded, nothing changed on the surface, and that was the hardest part. After the decision was made, my parents never brought it up again, not once. They spoke about college constantly, but only in reference to Lauren, dorm shopping lists, meal plans, campus tours. I sat at the table listening, nodding, pretending I was part of the same future. When someone finally asked what my plan was, my mother smiled and said, "Evelyn will figure it out. She always does." I started to believe that sentence was the only version of me they could see. I packed my things quietly that August. Lauren's boxes were labeled carefully, color-coded, double-checked. My parents hovered, offering advice, reminders, hugs. When it was my turn, I packed alone. I folded clothes methodically, stacking them into a single suitcase. I did not need much. I never had. The night before we left, my mother stood in my doorway and asked if I was excited. I told her yes. That was easier than explaining what excitement feels like when it is mixed with fear and resignation. She nodded, satisfied, as if my answer confirmed everything she believed about me. I promised myself something that night. I would not ask them for money, not for tuition, not for books, not for emergencies. If independence was what they admired in me, then I would make it absolute. Move-in day was chaos. Parents everywhere, cars unloading, tears and laughter spilling across campus. Lauren's dorm room was bright and new, her bed already made, decorations laid out like a magazine spread. My parents hugged her tightly, telling her how proud they were, how excited they were for her future. My place was off campus, a small rented room with thin walls and a radiator that clanged when it turned on. No one helped me carry my suitcase up the stairs. I did not ask. I had already learned the rhythm of doing things myself. When my parents said goodbye, my mother kissed my cheek and told me to call if I needed anything. I smiled and said I would. We both knew I would not. College did not erase the pattern, it magnified it. Lauren moved through campus like she belonged there. She joined clubs, went to parties, met people easily. Every time she needed money, it appeared. My parents called it support. I called it confirmation. I worked nights at the library. Quiet shifts, shelving books, cleaning tables, locking doors after midnight. My hands cracked from chemicals, my eyes burned from studying afterward. I learned how to survive on little sleep and colder coffee. Sometimes I passed Lauren on campus in the afternoon, sunlight catching her hair, laughter surrounding her. She waved, cheerful. "You look tired, Ev," she said once. "You should manage your time better." I smiled and kept walking. What she did not see was how carefully every hour of my life was planned. Every shift, every class, every dollar. I could not afford mistakes. I could not afford rest. There were nights when exhaustion pressed so hard on my chest it felt physical. Nights when I stared at the ceiling listening to the pipes groan and wondered what it would feel like to be taken care of without asking. But those thoughts passed. They had to. Midway through the semester, tuition deadlines loomed. I was short, not by much, but enough to matter. For the first time since leaving home, I hesitated. I told myself it would not hurt to ask, just once. Not for a gift, for a loan. I called home on a quiet afternoon between classes. My mother answered. I could hear the television in the background. Laughter, comfort. I explained carefully, my voice steady. I asked if they could help me cover part of the tuition this semester. I promised I would pay it back. There was a pause, long enough for my throat to tighten. Then, she said it calmly, almost kindly. "We already paid for Lauren. She deserved it. You will figure it out. You always do." The line went quiet. I stood there holding the phone long after the call ended. I stared at my reflection in the dark window of the hallway. My face looked older than it should have. Tired, focused, finished. That sentence did not break me. It closed something. That night I walked to the library earlier than usual. I organized shelves, wiped tables, worked until my hands ached. Somewhere between the quiet aisles and the hum of fluorescent lights, I made another decision. If they believed I did not deserve help, then fine, I would stop expecting it. I would stop hoping. I would turn every ounce of effort into something undeniable. This is the moment where my story stops being about favoritism and starts becoming about strategy. If you have ever been told you are strong as a reason to be ignored, comment 1 below. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who had no choice. Because what came next was not luck. It was preparation. By the second semester, the difference between our lives was no longer subtle. If you think favoritism fades once children leave home, then stay with me here. Because distance did not soften it, distance exposed it, and what I saw during those months changed the way I understood my family forever. Lauren thrived in college the way people imagine college should feel. Her dorm room was always full of voices, laughter, music spilling into the hallway. She joined a sorority within weeks. New outfits appeared every month. Weekend trips, brunch plans, group photos tagged and shared. My parents commented on every post with pride and hearts and encouragement. I watched from a distance not because I wanted to judge her, but because our paths barely crossed anymore. We shared the same campus but lived in different worlds. My world ran on schedules and silence. I woke up before sunrise most days. I studied early because the library was quiet then. I worked late because that was when shifts were available. Between classes and work I ate quickly, usually standing or walking because sitting felt like a luxury I could not afford. Lauren slept in when she could. She complained about being tired after late nights out. My parents laughed and told her to enjoy these years because college only happens once. No one ever said that to me. When Lauren needed books, my parents sent money. When I needed books, I waited for my paycheck. When Lauren wanted to join a club with fees, my parents encouraged it. When I skipped opportunities because I could not afford them, no one noticed. We ran into each other sometimes at the dining hall. She always looked put together, relaxed. I always felt like I was in between places. One afternoon she sat across from me, holding a smoothie and said, "You look exhausted, Evelyn. You should manage your time better, instead of working so much." Her tone was not cruel. That almost made it worse. I smiled. I always smiled. "Maybe you are right," I said. Then I finished my coffee and left. What I wanted to say was that my time was managed perfectly. Every hour accounted for, every decision intentional. Exhaustion was not a mistake. It was the cost. At night when the campus went quiet, and lights flickered off in dorm windows, I walked to the library for my shift. I shelved books until midnight, cleaned tables, locked doors. Sometimes I stayed longer to study, because it was warm and safe and familiar. The hum of the lights became background noise to my thoughts. Those were the hours I started thinking differently. While Lauren assumed support would always arrive, I began assuming it never would. That assumption sharpened me. It forced me to plan further ahead, to read more, to prepare more, to treat every assignment like it mattered, because for me, it did. College did not change the pattern I grew up with. It magnified it. Lauren complained about stress, and my parents sent care packages, snacks, notes, gift cards. When I mentioned being tired, my mother said, "You always push yourself so hard. Make sure you do not burn out." Then, she changed the subject. Burnout was a luxury I could not afford. There were moments when the unfairness hit harder than usual. Like when Lauren posted photos from a weekend trip, and my parents commented how proud they were that she was living her best life. Or when my father called to ask if she was settling in well, and forgot to ask about me entirely. Those moments used to hurt. Now they fueled something else. I started treating my life like a long game. Every shift was an investment. Every night spent studying was a deposit. I began looking up scholarships, internships, opportunities others ignored because they seemed too demanding. Demanding felt familiar. I learned how to work when I was tired, how to focus when I was lonely, how to keep going without encouragement. Those skills were never celebrated, but they were forming something solid inside me. Lauren once joked that I was lucky I did not have to deal with the pressure she felt. I almost laughed. Pressure had shaped me so completely that I did not recognize it anymore. The truth is, I was under pressure constantly, just a different kind, the kind that does not get sympathy, the kind that expects results without support. If this story feels familiar so far, if you have ever been the one quietly carrying everything alone, then pause for a second. Take a breath, and if this is hitting close to home, tap like on this video, not for me, for yourself. Because stories like this only get told when people recognize themselves in them. By the end of that year, Lauren had stories, memories, friendships to last a lifetime. I had something else: discipline, focus, a growing understanding that my strength did not come from being chosen, it came from being overlooked. And while she was living in the moment, I was building towards something she could not yet see. At the time, I did not know exactly what that something was. I only knew that the gap between our lives was widening, and one day, it would lead to a moment none of them were prepared for. That moment was coming, and when it arrived, it would not be loud. It would be undeniable. The moment that finally closed the door was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no slammed phones. And that is exactly why it still echoes the loudest. If you believe rejection only hurts when it is cruel, stay with me, because sometimes the calm answers are the ones that leave no room to return. By mid-semester, the pressure was constant, not overwhelming yet, but always present like a low hum I could not turn off. Tuition deadlines circled closer. I had calculated every number more times than I could count. Paychecks, rent, books, food. I was close, not far enough to panic, but close enough to hesitate. I told myself I would not ask. I had promised that the night I left home. But promises change when reality presses in. This was not about pride anymore. It was about survival. I did not want money. I wanted a bridge, something temporary, something I would pay back. I rehearsed the call in my head all morning. I chose my words carefully. I was not going to sound desperate. I was going to sound responsible. That mattered to me more than I realized at the time. I called in the early afternoon between classes. The hallway was quiet. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. I remember thinking how ordinary everything looked. How strange it was that something so ordinary could change everything. My mother answered on the third ring. I could hear the television in the background. A laugh track, comfort, normalcy. We exchanged small talk. I asked how she was. She asked how classes were. Her voice was warm, familiar, almost comforting enough to make me forget why I was calling. Then I asked. I explained the situation slowly, carefully. I told her I was short for tuition this semester, not by much. I told her I had a plan, extra shifts, a payment schedule. I told her I was not asking for a gift, just a loan, something I would repay. There was silence, not the kind filled with confusion or concern, the kind filled with calculation. I waited. My fingers tightened around the phone. Then she said it in a tone I recognized immediately. Calm, reasonable, final. We already paid for Lauren. I nodded even though she could not see me. She deserved it, my mother continued. College is hard. We wanted her to be able to focus. I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. I waited for something else. A question. A pause. An acknowledgement of what I had just asked. Instead, she added, "You are strong, Evelyn. You will figure it out. You always do." There it was again. The sentence that had followed me my entire life. The one that sounded like confidence but functioned like dismissal. I said okay. She told me to take care of myself. The television laughed again in the background. Then the call ended. I stood there long after the screen went dark. Students passed me in the hallway talking about weekend plans. Someone laughed nearby. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. Inside, something shifted quietly into place. I was not angry. That surprised me. I did not feel betrayed either. What I felt was clarity. That call was not about money. It was confirmation. It confirmed that no matter how carefully I asked, no matter how reasonable I sounded, no matter how hard I worked, my needs would always come second to Lauren's comfort. And more importantly, it confirmed something else. They believed my strength meant I did not deserve help. That belief did not make me want to fight them. It made me stop asking. That night, I walked to the library earlier than usual. I did not rush. I did not distract myself. I let the weight of the moment settle fully. I organized shelves, wiped tables, moved through the quiet aisles with purpose. Somewhere between the third-floor stacks and the humming lights, I made a decision. If I was going to figure it out alone, then I would do it completely, no partial dependence, no quiet hopes that someone might step in later. I would build something without their help, something they could not reinterpret, something they could not claim. That decision changed how I worked. I stopped seeing exhaustion as a problem to solve and started seeing it as a signal, a reminder that I was doing something difficult on purpose. I started mapping out every option available to me. Scholarships others ignored, classes others dropped, opportunities that required more discipline than talent. If support was not coming from my family, then it would come from preparation. When I went back to my room that night, I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older, harder, but also clearer. The girl who made that phone call was still hoping for permission. The girl who hung up did not need it anymore. If you are listening to this and you feel torn right now, here is my question for you. Was my mother right to prioritize one child over the other because one seemed stronger? Or does strength deserve support too? Comment your thoughts below. I want to know what you would have done in my place, because the truth is this moment was not the end of my story. It was the line I crossed when I stopped asking my family to see me and started preparing to show them. The night after that call, I did not cry. If you think the breaking point always comes with tears and anger, then this part may surprise you. Mine came with silence and a notebook, because when hope finally leaves the room, something else has space to enter. Focus. I walked back to my room slowly. I did not turn on music. I did not distract myself. I let the quiet stretch. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for someone to change their mind. I was done waiting altogether. I sat at my desk and opened a blank notebook. No dramatic thoughts, no vows spoken out loud, just a simple question written at the top of the page. What can I control? The answer was not comforting, but it was clear. My time, my effort, my discipline, everything else had already proven unreliable. I started breaking my life down into parts the way accountants break down numbers. Tuition, rent, books, food, transportation. I calculated worst-case scenarios, best-case ones too. I listed every scholarship I had ignored because it looked too competitive or too time-consuming. I circled the ones that required essays, long essays, the kind that scared people away. I had never been scared of work. From that night on, my days began earlier. I started showing up to the library before sunrise. The building was locked then, but the quiet outside was enough. I sat on the steps, reading under the glow of my phone flashlight. Financial textbooks, accounting journals, anything that pushed my understanding further than the classroom. Exhaustion did not disappear. It transformed. I stopped asking myself how tired I was and started asking how much progress I had made. That small shift changed everything. Fatigue became background noise. Focus became the main signal. I reorganized my schedule around energy instead of convenience. Hardest classes early, work late, sleep in short, deliberate stretches. It was not healthy. It was temporary. And I knew the difference. Around that time, I started staying in classes others dropped. The ones people called boring or dry. International reporting standards, advanced analysis, subjects that required patience more than charisma. Those rooms were quieter, smaller, less crowded. That was where I felt at home. One afternoon after class, a professor stopped me in the hallway. Professor McAllister. Tall, soft-spoken, known for failing students who did not take his course seriously. You understand this material, he said. Not as a question. Where did you study before? Nowhere special, I answered honestly. I just read a lot. He smiled slightly. That is rare. He asked if I would be interested in assisting him with research. Part-time, flexible hours. I almost said no out of habit. I was used to thinking I could not afford opportunities, but something inside me interrupted that reflex. Yes, I said. Working with him was different from anything I had experienced. He treated me like a colleague, asked for my opinion, trusted my work. When I corrected a spreadsheet error, he thanked me publicly in class. I felt something unfamiliar tighten in my chest, recognition without comparison. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell Lauren. I learned that my progress was safest when it stayed quiet. At night I wrote scholarship essays, not dramatic ones, honest ones. I wrote about working through college, about learning discipline before confidence, about growing up strong because there was no alternative. I did not frame myself as a victim, I framed myself as prepared. Weeks passed, then months. I was tired all the time. But I was also sharper, more precise. My thoughts moved faster. My confidence grew quietly, rooted in evidence, not praise. There were moments when doubt tried to creep back in. When I saw Lauren's photos from parties and trips and wondered if I was wasting something irreplaceable. But then I looked at my notes, my progress, my growing list of applications sent. And I remembered why I was doing this. I was not building a life that looked good. I was building one that could not be taken away. Late one evening, an email arrived from Professor McAllister. Short, professional, almost casual. He had nominated me for a national scholarship, one I had never heard of. Highly competitive, fully funded, sponsored by firms I recognized immediately. My hands shook as I read it, not because I thought I would win, but because someone had seen enough value in my work to put their name next to mine. That was new. I sat back in my chair and laughed quietly. It was not joy yet. It was disbelief mixed with something steadier, validation earned, not requested. I did not celebrate. I got back to work. I refined my essays, polished my resume, asked for feedback, revised again. Every sentence felt heavier than the last, because now it carried potential. This was no longer about surviving college. This was about changing the trajectory entirely. If you are listening to this and thinking this sounds lonely, you are right. It was. But loneliness has a strange way of sharpening ambition. When no one is watching, you are free to become something unexpected. That period of my life did not look impressive from the outside. No big announcements, no applause, just long nights and quiet progress. But it was the foundation, and everything that came after stood on it. What I did not know yet was that this quiet work was moving toward a moment my family would never forget. And when that moment arrived, it would make all the silence make sense. I did not tell anyone while I waited. That was the hardest part. If you think the work is the most painful stage, then you have never sat in silence knowing something important is unfolding while the people closest to you remain unaware. Because hope kept secret feels heavier than disappointment shared. After submitting the scholarship application, my life did not slow down. If anything, it became more precise. I treated every day like the decision had already been made and I was preparing to justify it. I kept my routines unchanged. Morning study, classes, work, nights spent reviewing material under dim lights. I refused to imagine outcomes. I had learned what expectation could do. Professor McAllister never mentioned the nomination again. He did not check in. He did not hint. That restraint made me respect him more. He had done his part. The rest was mine. Weeks passed. Winter settled over campus. Students complained about the cold. I barely noticed it. I moved through days like they were checkpoints. Sometimes I saw Lauren at a distance, laughing with friends wrapped in coats my parents had bought her. She looked warm, comfortable, secure. I wondered if she ever thought about me. I stopped wondering quickly. Curiosity was a luxury. One night I came back from my shift exhausted enough that my hands shook as I unlocked my door. I sat at my desk and opened my email without thinking. There it was, a subject line that made everything else disappear. National Merit Scholarship Committee. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Spam. A delayed rejection. My finger hovered over the mouse. My heart beat so hard I had to steady myself against the desk. I opened it. The words did not register all at once. I read them slowly. Then again. Then a third time. We are pleased to inform you. Selected recipient. 1 of 5 nationwide. Full funding. I sat there staring at the screen until the room felt unreal. No screaming, no jumping, just a deep, steady breath I did not realize I had been holding for years. I whispered it out loud, just to hear it exist. I got it. That moment was quiet. But it was not empty. It was full. Full of nights that no one saw. Full of being overlooked. Full of becoming capable when no one was paying attention. I did not call home. I did not text Lauren. I sat there and let the truth settle into my bones. This was mine. Not shared, not compared, not diluted. The scholarship came with expectations. Conferences, ceremonies, family invitations. The word family caught my eye when I read the details. Winners were encouraged to bring parents or guardians to the award ceremony. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. I had not imagined that part. Over the next few days, letters arrived by mail. Official, heavy paper, seals, pressed into the corners. I pinned one above my desk, not as decoration, but as proof. On nights when exhaustion returned, I looked at it and remembered why I kept going. Eventually, I did call home. Not out of excitement. Out of habit. My mother answered. I told her I had been selected for a national scholarship. I kept my voice neutral, controlled, as if I were delivering weather updates. That is nice, she said. A pause. Lauren just got invited to a faculty dinner. She is so excited. I smiled even though she could not see it. That is great, I said. We are both doing well then. When the call ended, something shifted again. I realized I was no longer waiting for their reaction to validate anything. Their response did not affect the weight of what I had earned. The ceremony was scheduled for early May. Invitations sent. Flights offered. I hesitated before forwarding the details to my parents. Then I did it anyway. Not to prove anything, to close a chapter cleanly. When the day came, I arrived early. The hall was large, filled with banners and low conversation. Other recipients sat nearby, nervous and proud. I recognized the feeling, not excitement, readiness. Then I saw my family enter. My parents walked in first, scanning the room uncertain. Lauren followed, camera in hand, ready to document someone else's moment as usual. I had not explained what kind of award this was. I had let them assume. When my name was announced, the room shifted. The speaker described my path. Working nights, no family financial support, quiet determination. Each word landed where it needed to. I stood. Applause rose. I walked toward the stage, feeling something unfamiliar. Weightlessness. From the stage I saw everything. My mother frozen, my father staring, Lauren lowering her camera slowly. That was when I understood something important. This was not revenge, this was revelation. I had not taken anything from them. I had simply become visible, and that visibility changed the balance forever. If you are still listening and wondering whether quiet effort ever pays off, remember this. The loudest moments often belong to those who prepared in silence. And what happened next proved that preparation does not end with recognition. It begins there. I thought the ceremony would be the hardest part. I was wrong. If you think the applause is where the tension peaks, wait until the clapping stops and the room expects you to explain yourself, because that is when people who ignored your struggle suddenly want a seat in your victory. After I stepped off the stage, everything moved at once. Professors approached first, shaking my hand, congratulating me, saying things like well-deserved and exceptional discipline. Strangers followed, recruiters, sponsors, people who spoke my name carefully, like it was something valuable they did not want to mispronounce. Business cards appeared in my hands faster than I could process. I smiled. I thanked them. I nodded. I listened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my family waiting. They stood near the back of the room, just outside the cluster of attention. My parents looked unsure of where to place themselves now. Lauren held her camera loosely at her side like she was no longer sure what it was meant to capture. I did not rush over. For once, I did not feel the urge to explain anything. Eventually, my mother approached me first. She smiled too quickly, the way people do when they are trying to catch up emotionally. "Evelyn, honey," she said, "we had no idea it was this big." I nodded. "I know." My father cleared his throat. "We are very proud of you." That sentence used to matter. Now it sounded like an echo arriving late. "You must have worked so hard," my mother added. "We wish you had told us sooner." I looked at her and felt something surprising. Not anger, not satisfaction, just distance. "I did tell you," I said. "Just not in a way you were listening for." There was an awkward pause. Lauren shifted closer, her expression uncertain. "I really did not know," she said quietly. "I thought you were getting help too." I met her eyes. "You never wondered why I worked nights while you went out every weekend." She looked down. "I did not want to think about it," she admitted. There it was. Not cruelty, convenience. My father tried again. "We always knew you would do well. You were just so capable." "Capable," I repeated. That word again. "Yes," he said quickly. "Independent. We did not want to hold you back." I smiled politely. "By not supporting me, you mean?" He did not answer. The conversation stalled there. No one yelled. No one apologized properly. No dramatic confrontation. Just the quiet realization that the story they had told themselves about me no longer fit the evidence standing in front of them. A representative from one of the sponsoring firms interrupted us. "Miss Brooks," they said, "we would love to speak with you about opportunities after graduation." "Of course," I replied. As I turned to leave, my mother reached for my arm. "Let us talk later," she said. "We should celebrate together." I gently stepped back. "Maybe another time," I said. "I have meetings." That was not revenge. That was boundaries. The reception continued. Conversations flowed easily at the recruiter's table. They spoke about mentorship programs, starting positions, relocation packages. New York, Chicago, real cities with real futures attached to them. I listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. Behind them, reflected in the glass wall, I saw my parents standing alone, watching, waiting, unsure if they were supposed to approach or retreat. For the first time, I did not feel responsible for their discomfort. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "We are so proud of you. We did not realize how much you were carrying." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "Thank you. I am heading back to campus now." Inside the hall, laughter swelled again. Music played softly. People celebrated accomplishments that had been years in the making. I stepped outside for air. The sun was setting. The sky was warm with color. I stood there holding my award and realized something important. This was the moment I had imagined for years. And it felt nothing like revenge. It felt like closure. I did not need them to apologize. I did not need them to feel guilty. I did not need to explain my pain. I had already moved past the point where their understanding was required. Later that night, I returned to my room and placed the award on my desk beside the letter. I sat on my bed and laughed softly at the thought that once upon a time I had begged for help with tuition. Now companies were competing to offer me a future. Funny how that works. If you are listening to this and thinking, "Wow, the parents suddenly showed up at the finish line like fans who missed the entire race," then you are not alone. So here is my question for you, and I want honest answers. Would you have forgiven them on the spot? Would you have confronted them? Or would you have done exactly what I did and simply kept walking? Drop your answer in the comments and let us argue about it respectfully, like emotionally mature adults who definitely have no family trauma at all. Because the final chapter of this story is not about what they said next. It is about what I chose to do after I left that room. And that choice changed everything. The morning after the ceremony felt quieter than it should have. If you think the story ends when people finally see you, stay with me. Because the real ending begins when you decide what to do with that visibility. And more importantly, when you decide who no longer gets access to you. I woke up early, the way I always had. The award sat on my desk catching the morning light. It looked solid, earned, real. For years I had imagined this moment would feel loud, victorious. Instead, it felt calm, like a door closing softly behind me. My phone buzzed before I even got out of bed. A message from my mother. "Come home this weekend. We want to celebrate you properly." I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. The old version of me would have rushed to explain, to reassure, to smooth things over. That version still lived somewhere inside me, but she was tired. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Maybe another time. I have a lot to prepare for. I set the phone down and did not feel guilty. Later that morning, an email arrived that made me laugh out loud. Subject line, offer letter. The firm that sponsored the scholarship wanted me to join their New York office as a junior auditor after graduation. Full benefits, mentorship, a real start. I did not hesitate. I clicked accept. That click felt heavier than the applause the day before. It was final. It was forward. I packed slowly that afternoon. Not everything, just enough to feel the shift beginning. While other students posed for graduation photos with their families, I watched from my window, hugging, tears, laughter. I expected to feel lonely. I did not. What I felt was space. Space to choose my future without asking permission. Space to breathe without bracing for disappointment. Space to become something that did not require explanation. Before leaving campus for the last time, I mailed one envelope home. Inside was a copy of my award letter. No note, no message, no argument, just proof, not for revenge, for closure. When the train pulled away, the city faded behind me. I watched buildings blur into distance and thought about the girl I had been, the one praised for being strong, the one who learned to survive quietly, the one who waited too long for validation that never came. I did not hate my family, I simply stopped needing them. New York was loud and unfamiliar. My apartment was small. The balcony barely fit one chair, but the city lights at night felt like 1,000 quiet affirmations. Motion everywhere, possibility everywhere. On my first evening I stood outside listening to traffic below and thought about my mother's words years ago. She deserved it, you didn't. I smiled. Maybe she was right. I had not deserved anything. I had earned it. Sometimes revenge is not confrontation. It is not punishment. It is not even forgiveness. Sometimes revenge is building a life so full that the people who doubted you no longer fit inside it. If you have ever been the one expected to be strong, the one who figured it out alone, the one who was overlooked because you did not cause trouble, then this story was for you. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about quiet strength, delayed justice, and the moments that change everything, then make sure you subscribe to the channel, because some stories do not end with shouting. They end with walking away and never looking back.